Welcome to Positive Talk Radio. Our goal is simple: to explore evolving ideas one conversation at a time. So, stay with us as right now we present. Not very often that I get to talk to somebody that's been doing a whole bunch of stuff in his life and it's many careers, many unique and exciting challenges. And he's an author and he's written some three thrillers and some really good stuff. He's uses technology and how it actually is when he puts together his books. And I just found out that the Curse of Cortez took 10 years of research to put together, and that takes a lot of stick-to-itiveness, as it were. And his name is Guy Morris. And Guy, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate having me. I'm doing great today. Thank you.
It is amazing when I get to look at some people's bios. When you put your bio together, did you actually realize all the things you've done in life?
You know, it doesn't always occur to me until I put it on paper and other people ask me about it. I'm always so forward thinking in terms of what next. How do I continue to be relevant? How do I continue to add value? How do I continue to explore the world while I still can? I don't necessarily look back all the time and think, oh, gee, I've had a very interesting life, until somebody brings it up and points it out to me at times. So I do realize it at times, but it's not front of mind, that for sure.
Well, yeah, you see, you put your bio together and you put it up against my bio. My bio looks like I can't keep a job. And your bio looks like you've been successful at a ton of different things in your life and continue to move forward with that. And
very kind. Thank you.
You were a 36-year executive with a Fortune 100 software, high tech, and global energy. You've been a published songwriter. I got to ask you about that. That is from a executive with a Fortune 100 company to becoming a songwriter for Disney. How the hell did that come about?
Well, it was a little bit by accident, to tell you the truth. I was a songwriter, and one of the things that I learned in college was that inspired me in college was learning about men of the Renaissance who were trained and practiced in sciences, arts, religion, politics, architecture. So they wanted to be well-rounded individuals as opposed to specialists only doing one thing, which is sort of what our society kind of pushes today. And so I was a musician, and I was a good songwriter. I wrote all the time. I led worship at church. And a close friend of mine was a film producer, and he was putting together a proposal for Nickelodeon on how to, he wanted Nickelodeon to basically do a show that was sort of a MTV music videos, but for kids. Well, he came to me and asked me if I'd write some songs for him. So I hadn't written kids songs at that point, and so I thought that was an interesting challenge for me. And so I thought, well, okay, I'll do that. And I wrote him 5 songs. He loved all the songs, and we went into a studio and did this marathon recording studio session. And his pitch for Nickelodeon didn't get off the ground. They didn't buy the project. So I just forgot about it. I figured, okay, that was fun. We had a lot of fun with it. And a few months later, I get a phone call out of the blue from a guy who was the head of Disney Records. And he wanted to know if I would come in. And he was listening to my tape that I'd sent in, and wanted to know if I'd come in and work on some projects for him. Now, to tell you the truth, I thought it was a prank because
I can understand.
I knew I had never sent the tape anywhere. I rarely promoted myself because I had a real job at the time that kept me pretty busy, and so I just never sent it to him. So I challenged him. I said, no, this is so and so, or this is somebody else. And he read the titles of the songs, and I thought, oh, I know who must have sent that to you. So I went into his office. I went into the Disney offices. I met with him for an interview and for a discussion, and he hired me. So I did contract writing for him, and how that worked was they would have a project, and they would send you sort of what they would call lead sheets for each of the characters that you were supposed to write about. It might include things about their background or who they were, what kind of anthropomorphic animal they were, maybe some taglines as the kind of typical things that they would say. And it it was a little bit of a challenge because they might call you up on a Tuesday afternoon and say they need songs by the next Tuesday, and that would be written and some form of recording so that they could listen to it. And so I went from sometimes taking months to write a single song because I was trying to perfect it, to I had to bang out 3 to 5 songs in a week.
That's different.
And so I landed some projects. I didn't land other projects, but that went on for a couple of years until and it was an interesting. I got to work on a scary song project, and I got to work on a dinosaurs project, and a Aladdin project, and a Little Mermaid project, and I think there was one or two others. That's my memory's kind of slipping for me right now, but it was a fun thing to do, and my son loved it because I was always writing kids songs instead of my other stuff, and so it was fun.
Now, did you get to go into the studio and meet any of the voice actors for any of these films and or animations?
No, that's actually a good point. Typically, these were projects where they already had the film made, right?
Oh,
And so what Disney would do in order to re-merchandise things with the highest margin available, rather than paying the high royalties for the songs that were already in the film that were written by people like Elton John or whatever, they would have toys that they would sell at Disney Studios and Disney stores around that they had Disney stores at the time everywhere, and all the malls before the malls took a nosedive. And so you would go in and you'd buy a toy. It might be a stuffed Little Mermaid doll or something, and then they would sell you a cassette with new songs dedicated to Little Mermaid. And so these were sort of not the film version of songs; these were sort of their merchandising songs. And even so, you could sell a few 100,000 songs that never ever hit the airwaves at all, simply by attaching them to their merchandise.
boy, were they marketing geniuses or what?
They were marketing geniuses, and they could pay me really cheap. Where if they did it with one of the lead songs, that I'm sure that they would cost them a lot more, and it cuts into their profit margins, which are really important for a company like Disney.
Oh yeah, well they're very excited about that, making a profit and stuff. But that's really cool. And you've did that, and even diving with sharks.
That was that I loved for a while in my younger years, and especially when I was living on a sailboat. I was diving all the time, and I went on. There was a couple of different tours I went on. One was off of Molokini in Hawaii. There was a couple of times in Tahiti, and once in Moorea. And the one that was the most exciting for me was a shark feeding dive, a cageless shark feeding dive off of Moorea.
Did you have a death wish?
Well, I was on my honeymoon at the time, and my wife certainly thought so. She said, "Okay, I'm going to marry you. I married you yesterday. Am I going to have to bury you tomorrow?" And I said, "Well, gee, I hope not. But other people have come back alive, so let's be hopeful." It was actually, for me, I came back from that just on cloud nine. I thought it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. What they did was they bought several large tunas, and they would cut them up so that they were nice and bloody. And one guy basically would go stand and basically hold the tuna way above his head. And what would start is you've seen videos of these fish tornadoes where the fish are so tightly together and they're just spinning in this tornado type of swimming structure. And the fish would basically come first and start nibbling away at the tuna. And then the sharks would come circling around that fish tornado, checking it out, and then they'd swim through the fish tornado, and they would simply grab one of the fishes, that didn't move out of the way fast enough, and come out the other side with one or two fish in their mouth. So it was when you're diving, you have limited visibility because you have the sort of the mask on the side of your eyes. And so you would be surprised sometimes by, now those who weren't holding the tuna would basically lay on the seafloor and try not to, as the French dive master told all of us, he says, do not look like bait. Um, and then he dived in the water before we could ask him what that meant. And we were like, okay, do you look, do I look, well, yeah, you look a little baitish to me. But what they meant was don't flap around a lot and don't make a lot of, motions like you're a dead fish. And so, yeah, you would be laying down and with no notice at all, this 8-foot gray shark would basically, or nurse shark would basically swim right by you within like a foot. And, or swim over the top of you, and just go after this bait. And we took turns holding the bait. And so I would be standing there, and you're surrounded by thousands of fish just wiggling around you at incredible speeds. And all of a sudden you'd see this, you'd see sharks coming in from all angles above you, going after that fish tornado. And it was a pretty incredible experience for me.
Now, when the shark came, were you told to let go of the bait, or did you keep the bait until they took it?
Well, no, as I said, the smaller fish were nibbling on the bait. The sharks were going after the fish in the fish tornado.
Oh, gotcha.
So they were the bait was basically to bring in all the other fish, and then the other fish, basically attracted the sharks.
Oh, those poor fish. Could you imagine? I'm going to get some tuna. I'm going to get some tuna. Oh, wait.
Yeah. That was a dirty trick. Yeah, it was. So some of those fish, yeah, but that was the way it was. But yeah, it definitely was. There was a danger. We had a tiger shark kind of show up toward the end, and I think that was the point. We were running low on tuna, and so that was the point where we said, okay, that's let's go ahead and call this a day.
Well, and did they tell you whether or not the tiger shark was the more aggressive and was liable to come after you where some of the other ones would not?
I think we were in a scenario where we probably, and they went back to the same spot daily to feed fish. So feed the sharks. So, we just decided it wasn't worth the risk. We didn't want to, we'd already been there. We were running low on air. So we'd been down, we were about 65 feet. So we were pretty much at our maximum dive duration anyway. So it was just a good signal to basically call it a day.
That would be the time that I would pee my pants in the water, which is good that it's in the water anyway.
Well, my only regret was that I didn't rent or buy an underwater camera.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what they have now, and I'm sure you're really well aware of this, but they've got the virtual gaming systems, and some of them have got films that they took in 3D and virtual reality, and so you can see all around you and the sharks and stuff like that. I admire your guts. I don't know that I'd have the guts to do that.
Well, my wife wasn't all too pleased, to tell you the truth. She doesn't like me talking about the story because she wasn't very happy about it.
She doesn't want to be a widow.
She didn't want to be a widow on day 2.
or to have to change your name to Lefty or something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly. She, right now you don't need a wheelchair. Let's keep it that way. Yeah.
So what is it about you that has all these things that you've decided to do in your life? What is it about you that keeps you motivated and keeps you moving forward and doing all these interesting things?
Life is short, and if we want to have meaning in it, we have to pursue it with vigor. And my mom died when she was young. I had death threats when I was a preteen. I had death threats from Mexican cartels when I was diving and exploring, researching my book, Curse of Cortez, down in Mexico. And I didn't want I want to make sure that when I go, it's like I don't want to wait till I'm old and to do my bucket list. I wanted to pursue it as much as I could while I still could enjoy it. And there's still many things I never got to do, and that on that. But I wanted to, I believe that all the medical studies I've ever read all concluded the same thing, that the death rate was 100%. And so I didn't want to worry about how I was going to die as much as I wanted to worry about how I was going to live. And so I think it's that constant search for new inspiration, for deeper meaning, for relevance, for the experiences that create those sparks of inspiration within us, and to really look at life as something to explore and to enjoy and to experience, and not be satisfied with a suburban or a sedentary, and albeit safe, lifestyle.
Well, the other problem with the second part that you were mentioning is that if you're planning on doing it in the future and you're going to wait till you're retired and then you're going to wait till you've got enough money to do it, you may not be physically able to do what you could have done 20 years before that.
Right.
And so you lose that ability. So I think what you're saying here is it's something that everybody should think about, and to do your bucket list while you can still carry your bucket.
Yep. Well, you can still do it, and and there were times when financially it was impossible for me to pursue what I wanted to do, and there's still things I've kind of put off till my latter years. But um, I tell my wife, I said, we're not getting any younger, we're not getting any richer. Let's go do it.
And she says, "Good, let's go play." And I'm glad you found someone that likes to play with you.
She's well. I had to tame down. They're flying a solo or with a friend a ultralight across the southern Australia, skydiving and a few other things. I had to put up to the side, but there were a few things I haven't done yet. And I tell her, I says, listen, if I ever get really old, rather than unplug me, just let me go skydiving. A last hurrah. If I'm going to go anyway, let's go with a big bang or big splat, whatever.
I've never asked anybody this, but I don't get to talk to a lot of skydivers because it can be dangerous. But
Mm-hmm.
what does it feel like? Do you guys do you have like as you're jumping out of the plane, does your sphincter tighten up and your stomach and all of that, or is it more calming and you're able to, because it would scare the hell out of me.
Well, the fear, the adrenaline rush is part of it. I think it's part of that. Doing something you probably shouldn't, um, but an experience that that will carry with you through until you're gone. And so I think that it's yeah, there's definitely a sphincter tightening moment, especially the first, getting out of the plane is hardest. But once you're on your way down, you're just trying to pay attention to, altitude, and you're trying to pay attention to the things you're doing. And I mean, God, there are some people that have done it so often that it's playtime. But when you're first doing it, it's certainly an intense adrenaline rush, and I think that's what I think a lot of daredevils are trying to look for. Now, I've kind of passed that. I'm 67 years old, so I've kind of passed the age where my wife will really allow. She'll barely let me, sled down the driveway in the snow. But she'll freak out if I do something like that. But I still try to continue to. I want to travel more. I still would love to go see places that might be a little bit dangerous to go to. And I've, as I said, I'd rather live well now than die poorly later.
Well, and so how you have lived and the chances you've taken. I know in one of your books,
Mm-hmm.
you talk about the cartels
Mm-hmm.
and stuff but from doing all these things that you've done, has that allowed you to put together books that have a lot of reality to them, that are really real and researched really well, because you've been around all of this stuff?
Absolutely, and I do an obscene amount of research for my books because I'm trying to really infuse my fiction with a really healthy dose of reality. There's always a factual foundation to every single book, and I really make sure that that's the case. I might have fictional characters and fictional plots, but even there, both the plots and the characters are based on. They may be based on people I've met along the way. They may be based on things I've experienced or some plausible scenarios. My artificial intelligence books were inspired by a time when I discovered that through a very obscure Associated Press article, that a program had escaped the Lawrence Livermore Laboratories at Sandia, which is an NSA spy lab. And when I spent months obsessed with that story, trying to figure out exactly how a spy program, could escape the NSA labs, and which implied intent, which implied intelligence, which implied the ability for it to move itself and then erase the log trails so that the NSA didn't know where it went. And when I tried to figure out exactly what the NSA was trying to do with a program that had that amazing stealth capability, 2 FBI agents showed up at my door, which also freaked my wife out. we had conversations about that event for weeks. She says, "Why are there 2 FBI agents in my dining room? What did you do? And who are you really? Who are you?" So, but yeah, that was a great experience as well, and it validated my analysis. And that program became a character in my book, in Swarm and the Last Ark. So all my books are deeply rooted in true events, true history, true technology, politics, religion, as well as my own personal experiences.
In your in the things that you've done and in your belief structure,
Mhm.
where do you think that we're going with AI? Because it's now it's a great big topic of conversation. That
Absolutely is, I want to say that we've had amazing advances in AI over the last several years that most people weren't really aware of. I think Chat GPT has become a really big buzzword, and it's really brought AI to the forefront of our culture, in part because it's now the first time an average consumer has had a chance to actually interact and experience and interact with an artificial intelligence. But these are technologies that have been around and developing in leaps and bounds over the last several years. I first started experimenting in business operations with an early stage of pre-machine learning AI back in the late 90s. And so the technologies have been around. They've been really enabled by the advances in our computing technology, advances in learning capabilities, big data. The amount of data that an artificial intelligence can absorb is a real critical factor. Just to give you an example, the current version of ChatGPT uses roughly 75 billion data points. The next version that will come out will use something along the lines of 100 trillion data points.
holy
So
mackerel.
these are almost unfathomable levels of data and details that the machine gets to basically churn to learn on. And it wasn't the rapid advance of all of that has really been in part because of that large level of data available. Now, that's actually one of the risks that AI has in some of the higher levels of form. So if you think about AI is doing great jobs in medicine, pharmaceuticals, materials sciences, nanosciences, astrophysics. So we're using AI in intelligence, in cybersecurity, and in weapons development. Now, it's so much so that in 2020, I believe it was, the RAND Corporation, which is one of the major think tanks, wrote a report for the DoD. And in that report, among the top 10 national security risks for America, AI data poisoning was listed as one of the top 10 risks. Now, why is that? Well, it's fairly simple when you think about it. First off, artificial intelligence is all of them use a common a layered system of algorithms and data, and those algorithms are very complex. The data sources are very complex themselves, and so it's almost a black box for AI. When we think about normal program testing, we should know that if we put this data in, we should get this extra data out. AI is not the same way because of the way it processes the data and because of the volumes of data that it processes. But if I were to start introducing bad data, intentionally bad data, into an artificial intelligence data model, I could get extremely random or false outcomes from that artificial intelligence. And it would be untraceable as to what caused that false outcome. Now, that's fairly benign if you're looking at a large language model such as ChatGPT, where maybe it's just trying to tell you how did the Civil War start and it gives you some bizarre answer. But if I'm using an AI to basically monitor and manage the nuclear power plant on a nuclear submarine, because it's smarter for the AI and it's more responsive than having people do it. Or if I'm using that AI to basically manage cybersecurity, or as we're using AI to basically monitor our nuclear defense system. The results could be that I see a ghost, that the AI basically sees an incoming missile when it's mainly just a weather balloon. And so it could result in some catastrophic disasters that would be a sabotage that would be wholly untraceable back to the source of that AI data poisoning. And there's a perfect case and study that we have on that. In 2021, I believe, there was a virus that became known as the SolarWinds virus. Now, SolarWinds is a tech company, and they discovered a virus in their system completely by accident. Some guy just happened to stumble on it, but it had already been in their system, they determined, for well over 9 months. And nobody knew it was there. And to this day, they weren't exactly sure what that virus was meant to do. It wasn't stealing data, and nor was it corrupting data, which now that same virus, was introduced through a normal software update. So all data companies, all data centers go through a routine of basically patching their systems, and if they have 200 different applications in their data system, all of those applications require periodic updates, and they'll get these updates in sort of combined scenarios where it's not just one company at a time. They'll get a source of a number of updates. And so they're patching their systems all the time. And working with Oracle and Microsoft, this was a common process for us to do. But they couldn't tell. So that software, other than coming through the firewall, like a virus, like a cyber attack, where we have billions of dollars invested in firewall protections and other protections, it came in through this innocuous data update, which set a number of, and that same update impacted 18,000 corporations and 8 major U.S. agencies. Many of those corporations were the same corporations, data corporations, managing the data, the big data that feeds all of these various AIs. And many of those U.S. agencies included agencies that deal with our nuclear energy, dealt with our defense systems, dealt with our cybersecurity, dealt with misinformation. From that, we had recent hacks. There were millions of government employees' confidential information was stolen and sold on the dark web. And so we don't know what that virus was meant to do, but the potential was there that it was designed to basically create false personas or false feeds into that large data model. So given that feed, if we fed in enough data, that could create sabotage that could start a nuclear war, start a third world war, or basically bring down our cybersecurity protections. So,
also including the The electrical grid, I would
The
think.
electrical grid to some extent. The electrical grid is a little bit outdated in some of its technologies, but as we've computerized it and tried to modernize it, yes, it absolutely could affect the electrical grid as well.
So we could end up in a war that we don't even know that we're in, and it could be a cyber war, and we can't even track it and know where it came from.
That's exactly right. That's
That
exactly
is the guy. That's a scary idea.
It's a
Like
scary
that.
idea, and that's part of the idea. That's part of the premise of my book Swarm. Is a large scale cyber attack of that nature. Now imagine, and now we also ChatGPT is a wonderful technology. I think it's going to replace some jobs. It's going to enable some people to do their job faster and better. But it also has potential malicious capabilities. We already know that ChatGPT, which it can write code, has been used to write malicious code. And so we already know that. Now, are they trying to work to try and prevent that from happening? Yeah, but as creative as virus code writers are at creating their unique viruses, it's just as hard for the ChatGPT developers, a company called OpenAI, to anticipate all of those things and prevent them. I was watching an interview of the president of OpenAI recently, and one of the things that he said was a little bit chilling, which is, no, they can't really prevent all these things, but gee, once something happens, they can go back and fix it.
Oh, good.
Okay, so we have a disaster, and then you're going to go back and try and plug the hole in dam that created the disaster. That's a little late for me, and that's where we're at. The technologies are moving faster. They're developing faster than our legal or technical ability to manage them and control them.
And that will probably be the case for
that creates a definitely negative scenario.
Yeah, because that'll be the case forever, because AI it just computes and operates faster, and the faster it gets, us poor humans, the slower we're going to react.
Well, and so we can combine a few other scenarios that become a little bit scary. Now, for decades, the idea of sentient AI was sort of taboo. It's just a program. It's just responding based on the data it's giving. It's not necessarily thinking for itself or making its own value decisions or projecting new solutions that maybe we hadn't really thought of yet. But machine learning is all about coming up with new scenarios that we didn't anticipate when we were writing the program. And that's how the machines, the AIs are doing a better job at certain things. Now, some of these things are very good. We have AI that can detect cancer cells in CAT scans much more accurately and faster than the best doctors can. So that's a good scenario. We want AI to be able to do those good things. We want AI to be able to work harder and faster at solving real problems than we can. But what if we had a scenario where there are now 15 to 25 companies around the world, mostly in the US, Europe, and China, dedicated to creating a sentient AI? And they're actually within a small number of years of actually doing so. And the fact is, with some of the government structures, particularly in China and other places, they could have already crossed that threshold, and we just don't know about it yet. And so we're within a few years of an AI. Now, Bill Gates once said that one of the major dangers of artificial intelligence is that we can't guarantee it's going to have the same values and goals as we do. And so now that once you start getting to an AI that's sentient and an AI that reaches singularity, which many have said that is as soon as 2029, singularity means that an AI, a single AI, is as smart as a single human. Now, assuming that we have extremely, really smart people that are developing AI, we now have the scenario of Jurassic Park, where life finds a way. Now, there would be nothing necessarily stopping a sentient AI who's reached singularity from developing another sentient AI based on values that we don't share.
Ooh, now that's a. Is that the fourth book, by the way? Is that
That's actually working in the fourth book. Yeah, a little bit. I'm dealing with that. I'm trying to struggle with trying. Well, what would that really mean? What could that really look like? Could it be benign, or could it be malicious? And how so? And so these are very serious questions that we really have to address. And right now, if I were to say, well, what are the controls? What are the legal international controls from this happening? And let's say being built into a weapon system. And the reality is there are none. And both in the US or in an international level. Now, we already are working on AI weapon systems that cross a moral threshold, and which there's a treaty called the laws, which stands for Lethal Autonomous Weapon Systems. Now, it's okay. The laws will basically say it's okay to make an AI that creates a weapon that's smarter and faster and more accurate and better at doing what it's doing. But we need to stop, and we need to draw the line at an AI that can both select a target and then decide to pull the trigger, or to basically make a kill shot, right? Whether that's a flying drone, or whether that's a missile response system, or whether that's an automatic gun or a laser, or like the Iron Dome over Israel, all are basically incorporating AI to be more efficient and faster. But DARPA has already created, the Navy already has one in deployment, a set of drones that work in a swarm. And now the Navy swarm drones are about 6 inches. They're basically launched from a cannon, and they can essentially swarm an enemy location to basically provide 1,000 different eyes from 1,000 different angles, so that the Navy knows where all the combatants are, where all of the hidden dangers are before they make an attack. DARPA is currently working on a new one called, I can't remember what they call it. I believe it's called the Hive, where it's 18-inch drones that will also work in swarms of 1,000 to 10,000. And these drones are actually armed. Now, it's almost impossible, certainly impractical, probably impossible for us to have a soldier behind each one of those drones, thinking and acting as fast as the drone can think and act, to decide that now that something's been identified as perhaps an enemy combatant, or an enemy missile station or gun station or whatever, to pull the trigger. So these drones are already being trained to act in an autonomous way. Now, we haven't deployed them yet because we haven't made that decision, but I can imagine a scenario if China decides that they want to actually take Taiwan, and they're making serious threats to do so, where we wouldn't be tempted to basically deploy something like that. And so we're already creating AI that can decide that for itself, that you're a target and that you should be taken out. And now the question is, have we ever created a technology that was infallible? We haven't. We've never created a program that was 100% free of bugs, tested so much that it would never make a mistake, could not be corrupted by AI data poisoning, or could not be corrupted in some way. And so we're kind of crossing a pretty dangerous threshold with artificial intelligence. And while it has enormous potential, we're unprepared for the risks that potential brings with it.
question for you? Is it possible down the road for an AI machine that is capable of doing things like a human does them? Can they, and as an example, we were to send them into battle, and
Mm-hmm.
rather than sending soldiers, we
Yep.
sent these, but then they develop as they continue to evolve, self-preservation.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Boston Dynamics is a robotics company that's creating AI soldiers now. And they, because these soldiers have to be agile, they have to be mobile, they have to be away, they can't be connected to a wire of any sort. So we're dealing with the communication transmissions, the data transmissions through microwave transmissions and other vehicles. But they're so agile right now that I've seen videos, and you can go on YouTube and just say Boston Dynamics and see their robotics. They got them where they can dance. I mean, they can jump over hurdles, they can climb rocks and climb over things. They're extremely agile. And the next step that they won't show you the video on is how are these robotics good at basically using weapon systems. Now it's good if we have a robotic AI that basically can do demining, can
right,
minefield. It's good if we can basically have an AI that can sneak behind enemy lines and do reconnaissance. It's potentially dangerous if we're allowing that same AI robotic soldier to basically go into battle. And again, the question is, do we want a machine to decide that somebody's a combatant and take them out? You can imagine in a lot of places where there's citizens caught in the crossfire, where maybe a mother raises a gun trying to protect her 4 children against this robot that's just entered her home, and the robot determining, well, that person with a gun is an enemy, right? Exactly. And so there are a number of scenarios, which is one of the reasons why they haven't been deployed till now, up so far, is they're trying to get these machines to get beyond those easily identifiable risk factors. But as we edge closer to conflict, either with Russia or with China, there's always going to be the temptation to deploy these systems. Now, the other thing is we have to ask. We know that Russia is behind the curve, because they just don't have a lot of their intellectual capacities left the country. But we know China is absolutely committed to artificial intelligence, and both China and Putin and Xi Jinping have basically stated that artificial intelligence, whoever comes to dominate the field of artificial intelligence, will be the country that basically dominates the world in the next century. And we know that this is China's stated goal for the next century, and that they are aggressively building their military, building their navy, building their missile systems, building their AI surveillance systems. Now, many people have heard about the AI surveillance system in China, which uses facial recognition, social media patterns, communications, surveillance communications, and can track you as you go from place to place, knows what you buy, knows where you spend, and can define, based on that information by itself, whether or not you're a good citizen. Right. And based on that good citizen status, can restrict your ability to purchase, can restrict your ability to access information online. What most people don't know is that China has already sold all or a portion of that same type of system to over 40 countries.
So it's worldwide now.
They're certainly trying to get it worldwide. I mean, there have been a few cities in the United States interested in that technology for the sake of controlling crime. But that's a little bit like, we're going to basically monitor everybody so we can find the 1 or 2% of the criminals in the city.
We have this thing called the Constitution that would
prohibit that. We do, but we also had, as Edward Snowden showed, that even our own government isn't beyond basically pushing right up against the edge of that Constitution as close as it can in order to protect the nation. But most of the systems that China has sold to have either been in South Asia, Africa, the Middle East, or Latin America. They haven't sold anything in the United States. And the Huawei internet system, which was banned in the United States and Canada, was part of the reason why.
Now, I'm assuming that as far as AI intelligence goes, you can't program morality into it? Is that, or
I
can
believe you can. The question is, are the AI developers working on that as part of the process? Um, One of the things I bring up in my books is that um, the technology is moving faster than we are, and we're not focusing on value systems as much as functional capabilities. The data sources that we're feeding in are not the data sources to project morality. And so we get a little bit of it in large language models around cultural issues where they say, well, they've trained the AI or restricted the AI from speaking things that we would find culturally offensive. So, for example, a few years ago, Microsoft released a chatbot on the internet, and they allowed the internet, they allowed it to be basically exposed to the internet so that it could learn how normal people talk and interact with each other. And within 24 hours, that chatbot was basically espousing racist and fascist and Nazi viewpoints. And so they had to take it down. By the second day, they had to take it down so that they could realize that it would learn. It would learn quickly, but we didn't necessarily have the value models worked out so that it would basically reject things that conflicted with our values. And so, because all of that kind of talk exists on the internet in buckets, the AI model basically learned to adapt it.
so it doesn't, it can't reflect what is, a website that is espousing lies about a particular subject. It isn't capable yet to go in there and say, nope, that's a lie, based upon the research that it does with other websites, to make a value judgment.
In some cases, we are training AI. There are training AIs to basically make that value distinction. But right now, most of the AI development has not gone that deeply. And so, yeah, one of the key risks that people will talk about with the current Chat GPT is that it could be used to promote misinformation.
It's a fascinating topic, and I guess from what I've heard, and correct me, but I think the next 5 to 10 years are going to be really telling in the development of this, to
Yeah.
determine where we are we going to draw the line, and is there a point in time when we are no longer going to be in control to draw that line?
We've already we're already crossing that threshold.
Oh, great.
And this actually was a question that came up with the owner of the president of ChatGPT, and it would be very difficult. For example, Google just announced an AI called Bart to basically be part of their search engine, and Microsoft is going to be using ChatGPT as part of their search engine. But as AI continues to advance rapidly through corporate America, and through the military and through governments, both within the U.S. and abroad, we're reaching the point where we can't necessarily just unplug it, right? You'd say, well, if an AI goes bad, you just go in and plug the computer. Well, similar to how Microsoft tried to argue that they couldn't take the browser out of their Windows system because they had embedded it into the Windows system itself. We're crossing that threshold with AI. And many of the AI, and a lot of people don't realize this, but are built around what we call neural networks. And I mentioned the data models and how these big data models are managed by dozens or hundreds of companies. And there are neural networks around the world. The biggest one, or one of the ones that I keep a close eye on, is one called Singularity Net. And that's based out of Hong Kong. So it's a China-controlled neural network. And that neural network is specifically oriented towards artificial intelligence sharing information with each other. So you've now got millions of communications back and forth between AI to AI. And these communications are are such that even the developers aren't exactly sure what the AIs are, what kind of information the AIs are passing back and forth. We already have AI that can code from scratch as well as self code itself. And some of that coding is written in a way that the developers aren't entirely sure what the AI is coding. And so we've crossed the threshold already where if an AI were to infiltrate a neural network and start to promote values or objectives that the developers had never envisioned, as a way of self-preservation or as a way of optimizing, um, um, uh, uh, rough scenario, an AI is built to optimize minimize pollutants and optimize air quality, eliminating people or systems or infrastructure to do so. Maybe it decides that that's part of something it should do. So we've already kind of crossed that threshold, or are right at the verge of crossing that threshold already, where it would be impossible to necessarily figure out where that bug really started, where that AI objective started, and unplug it. You couldn't necessarily unplug Google. Right?
Not anymore.
Yeah.
No. And the algorithms, we talk a lot about algorithms and stuff in my business of how do people get information? Where do they get pointed to? What sites do they get pointed to? How is it disseminated? Which are very closely held secrets by these companies.
Right.
They
Right.
don't, they don't want you to know how they're determining who is getting play, but they are quite literally making kings of some people, paupers out of some people, liars, and all that. It's really difficult. Did you ever think? Now, by the way, we're talking with Guy Morris. Go to guymorrisbooks.com. You can find out all about him and the 3 books he's written: Swarm, Last Ark, and Curse of Cortez, and pick them up. He's a fabulous interview, and it would have to be a great writer. But did you ever think that your next novel was going to become a historical fiction?
Um, well, I mean, yeah, all my novels are based on some historical fact and its current events and other things. So, I mean, I intentionally write that. There's a part of me that wonders whether my novels are so realistic that it scares people. I've actually, I do a lot of signing events throughout the year, and every once in a while, I'll run into an author or reader, and I'll tell them about what I'm writing about, and they'll be like, "No, that's too scary for me. That's too real. I can't even watch the news anymore. Your books would keep me up at night, and I can't have that." Um,
And that is so true because we don't know. We all of us sitting here that go to work every day and we watch, like Gonzaga is going to be playing in the final or in the um, March Madness tonight, and so a lot of us are going to be stuck with that, and we're not going to turn on the news, and we're not going to be, but then we hear about these things that are actually going on, and they're so beyond the scope of anything that I'd thought I'd see in my lifetime.
mhm.
It really is remarkable. And like AI, there were movies back in the day about artificial intelligence and becoming sentient beings and all of that. And we thought, oh, that's science fiction. It's real. It's happening now.
It's real. Now, I do want to caution that sometimes we give AI um, either a sense of malevolence and evil intent that I don't think it necessarily deserves. It still is a programmable model, and it's really built to optimize what it was designed to do within some limits and constraints. But because we are so far behind the curve, I mean, Congress is just barely even aware that they need to do something right now. They have absolutely no clue. I mean, they can't even figure out how to control the internet, which has been proven harmful for over a decade. We've been kicking climate change down the road, the can down the road for decades. So the ability for us as either a nation or an international community to get ahead of the curve is, is not highly likely at this point without some catastrophic disaster coming along the line that prompts that. And so my fear is that we're basically the dangers of AI have to do more with what we're designing it to do and who's doing that designing. So different than nuclear technology, which we knew was, which basically was a cat out of the bag very soon after it was developed. The United States developed it, and all of a sudden we had a dozen nations basically getting a hold of this technology and developing their own versions until we got together as an international community and we started putting caps on that. And we started restricting the intellectual knowledge of the intellectual property about what to do and how to do it. We started restricting the people who were trained to do it and watching and monitoring and licensing those people very carefully. We started monitoring and managing the plutonium resources necessary for all of this in a very tight way. And while those things have been broken, we've had thefts, we've had stolen materials, we've had stolen IP. We've tried too hard to basically put a cap on that. Right now, there are no caps on the intellectual property or the intellectual people necessary to build artificial intelligence. So you can imagine, of the thousands of billionaires that exist around the planet right now, any one of them could basically hire the people, buy the computers and technology to create something with no requirements at all that they had to report that to anybody.
Mr. Musk would be a prime candidate to do.
And I think he is, actually. And he's one of the, Elon basically said about a few years back that with artificial intelligence, we're summoning the demon. And then he turned around and basically started investing in artificial intelligence companies. He's now talking about bringing out an artificially intelligence driven robotic that he says would be a household aid that he wants to sell. He's included artificial intelligence in most of his cars and other products. And so, yeah, we have no controls over the billionaires out there or the countries out there spending tens of billions a year as to what they're doing with the technology and how will that impact us on a daily basis. And so,
you know, my former profession is real concerned about that they're going to automate bus driving.
Yeah. And right now, driverless cars are a reality. They're not common. They still have dangers. They still have restrictions. They're still trying to get licensed and all that kind of stuff. But they do have license to test them, but they do have some blind spots. They have blind spots recognizing people of color. They have blind spots recognizing children below a certain height. There's all kinds of blind spots that they're still dealing with. Now, I have no question that they'll try and resolve those known blind spots, but that's just one example. And we are trying to look at how artificial intelligence can be used across so many different industries that do affect us. Communications. I have a friend of mine that used to be a colleague at Microsoft. He's now working for one of the big cell companies in building artificial intelligence into their intelligent network. And it crosses a number of different privacy models and privacy thresholds. And they're having trouble figuring out how to get the technology not only to do what they want to do well, but for it not to do other things that we don't want it to do and create a potential exposure to privacy information that it might use, or restrict people from communicating that don't deserve the restriction. So there are ramifications for how it's being used, and the fact that it's being used now because it's the hottest technology. Google, Microsoft, Oracle, and dozens of other companies are promoting, OpenAI and others are promoting artificial intelligence applications that will permeate the business in hundreds of different ways and permeate basically the products that we use every day.
I will tell you, Guy. By the way, we're talking with Guy Morris, and he's an author. And you've got lots and lots of material to work with these days. I can tell
Yeah,
you.
I do.
In
Almost too
the,
much. I'm a little overwhelmed at times.
do you know that yesterday in Los Angeles, California, they had two tornadoes touch down?
Yes. And I was in, well, probably had to be 30 years ago now, maybe 35 years ago or more. I actually witnessed a near tornado touchdown in Irvine, California, from my office. I had an office in Irvine at the time, and I saw a funnel cloud basically forming a couple hundred yards away, and it freaked me out because I was watching this funnel cloud basically form and move toward the freeway. Now, it never fully formed, it never fully touched down, but it came very, very close. And so, yeah, it's rare, certainly very rare, but it can happen.
It reminds me there was a movie called Day After Tomorrow, and
Hmm.
they had a picture of tornadoes all over Southern California and all of that, and that's global warming, and we could be going back there to, I've never seen a winter like this in Southern California, and the number of storms that they've had and how much snow they're getting and stuff. Their drought effectively is over. It looks like.
Well, it looks like it's certainly over for the short period of time. The
Right.
water usage in the population of California has just skyrocketed. I don't know if it's basically replenished the Colorado River systems, and
Not yet.
it will have an impact on that. But a number of the Southern California communities rely on the Colorado River, as well as Arizona, Nevada, and others. And so there are cities in California that are have been shut off from having any water at all. And there's cities in Arizona that are now can no longer get water because of the drought conditions. And one of the problems with California, because of the way they've built their reservoir systems, is that so much of the water that they've gotten this year it just creates floods and runs off into the ocean, that they're not capturing a lot of it. They're capturing some of it, but certainly not all of it. It has helped with some of the several of the major reservoirs that they've had. So that'll stave off a severe situation come this summer. But the farm communities in Central America don't use those systems. They use a lot of groundwater, and it takes long, and the groundwater has been pretty much depleted. So we still have a problem. It's not as dire and apocalyptic within the next year or two that it was. It'll take a few years for that water to basically be depleted again. But unless this becomes a normal weather pattern, once every 20-year, superstorms is given the population growth and use growth in California, is still problematic. But so I'm not ready to say it's solved. I'm just saying we got a prayerful, thankful reprieve that it's not immediate.
You must spend a great deal of time doing research because you are so learned on so many subjects, which by the way makes you a great novelist.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
that really is cool. You need to go to his website, which is of course guymorrisbooks.com. He's got three great books out: Swarm, Lost Ark, and Curse of Cortez. Curse of Cortez, I would like to that you did 10 years of research to get that book done. That goes deeply into stuff that we don't. I'm not even sure that what you're talking about there is really in the history books.
Well, a lot of it is, but certainly some of it came out of the Mayan mythologies, but also I had to do research into geology and some of the younger Dryas research. So one of the things that it started from a real story. It started actually the book started as a sequel to a short story that I wrote for my son 35 years ago when he was like 11 years old. And it was a typical 11-year-olds. They love pirates, they love treasures, lost civilizations, ghosts, all that kind of stuff. But I'm always love books that are based on something real, and so I wanted to do research on a real lost plunder and try and dive into the mystery. Now the story was that in 1672, Henry Morgan took 36 ships, 2,000 men to raid the city of Panama, which was the richest city in the New World for a lot of reasons I won't go into. He lost roughly half of the men before he even got to the city. But even so, with roughly 1,000 men, he took over the city within a day as it was burning to the ground. And a 400-ton ship called the Santissimo de Trinidad basically escaped the harbor with probably full of gold or half full of gold. But even so, he brought back 30 to 35 tons of plunder and 600 slaves. But when he reached his fleet on the Caribbean side of the isthmus, he cheated everybody, and even his own men, and basically gave them a pittance of a couple hundred pieces of gold each, which was a small fraction of what he'd taken. And then he disappeared with all the rest of the treasure on 3 ships that were never seen again. But Morgan survived, and he showed up, and so something happened. He put it someplace because he showed up with an empty ship in Port Royal, Jamaica, about 4 months later, and was arrested immediately by the British because he broke a peace treaty with Spain when he did that raid. Well, they sent him to London, where he was under house arrest for 3 years. But in London, he was a hero. He broke the financial back of the Spanish. They never recovered from that again. He opened up the Caribbean to the English and the Dutch and the French and everybody else, and was knighted as Sir Henry Morgan, sent back to Jamaica as lieutenant governor with a garrison of soldiers. But instead of going after and he was to get rid of piracy. But he only went after one man, a guy named John Searles, who was the captain of a ship called the Caguay, which was part of his fleet going after Panama. But apparently John Searles had cheated Morgan before he cheated everybody else. The rumor was he actually captured the Santissimo de Trinidad and unloaded a big portion of its treasure, and he disappeared with that. But Morgan instead went into this haunted, drunken, depressed debauchery and burned his logbooks before he died, so the world would never know the truth of what happened to his $35 billion, 35-ton billion-dollar plunder, 600 souls, and 3 ships. And 3 years after he died, the whole city of Port Royal sinks into the ocean, including his grave, from an earthquake tsunami. Many of the locals at the time said they had been cursed by Morgan. I was fascinated with that story. I thought that's an amazing story for a number of reasons. One was it's really harder than you think to lose 30, 35 tons.
You think?
Of plunder with 3 ships and 500 souls. You can't just go, 5 steps, dig under this tree, and there it is, X marks the spot. And so I was determined to find clues as to where he had hidden it, under the belief that by now somebody must have found something. Maybe they didn't even understand what it was, but they found something. And I found a person who I believe did find it. His name was F.A. Mitchell Hedges. He got away with $6 million of 1911 gold after digging on this one island for 7 years and claiming 6 months before he disappeared, he had found Atlantis, which was an unusual claim in and of itself. And then the second thing I wanted to find out was what traumatized Morgan, what scared the British piss out of him so bad that he would burn his logbooks to keep the world from learning the truth, or what would keep him from going back and getting the billion-dollar plunder he had already killed thousands of people to get. And he was a pretty greedy kind of guy. So something happened in Morgan, and I was determined to figure out what that was as well. And so part of the research was to find out what happened to the treasure. And once I had an island where I was pretty sure I had an idea of where he had stored it, and I figured it had to be some kind of cavern structure somewhere, right, in order for it to be hidden. But there are only so many places where you can go in the Caribbean to find that kind of infrastructure. And so I went to all the places. I read every book ever written by him, including the biographer that was on the trip to Panama with him, and searched every island, every place that had a Morgan name slapped on the door for a tourist reason. And once I found this island, I realized that Morgan's uncle had conquered that island 40 years before Panama, 30 years before Panama, and turned it into a raging pirate base. So Morgan knew this island extremely well. It had a volcanic history, so it had lots of caverns and tubes and places to hide things. And to this day, there are certain of those caverns that the locals will not go to because they are said to be haunted by evil spirits. Now, Morgan was an extremely superstitious man. And so that was another clue. When I traced the history of that island back 100 years before Morgan's uncle, a Spanish Inquisition massacre had gotten rid of everybody, all the indigenous people on this island, and stopped a 2,000-year pilgrimage of other people from the mainland canoeing 50 miles to this island before anybody, the Spanish, bothered to ask, why are these peasants canoeing 50 miles over open ocean to come to this island? What's so special about this place? And I tied that pilgrimage to the Mayan 5,000-year calendar and the Mayan creation myth. Now, in the Mayan creation myth, which was one of the things that was interesting about it, is that the Mayans creation myth had said that the world had been created and destroyed 3 times before the Spanish had arrived in 1514. And they were on what they called the 4th epoch. And what I finally realized was that when the Mayans called an epoch, they were tying that to their 5,000-year calendar. So each of those creations and destructions aligned with a cycle of that 5,000-year calendar. And the second epoch of the calendar, the world was destroyed by a massive fire that just consumed the entire planet, to them, the entire world, and then flooded. This aligned directly to the Younger Dryas asteroid event. So people survived the Younger Dryas asteroid event in Central America and learned to talk about it until they wrote about it in their Mayan myth. And that basically connected Morgan's treasure to this ancient cataclysm. And it was a fascinating journey for me to really do. And so I had to write what I felt would be an equally compelling, cool story that was a modern day for just like an Indiana Jones or a Da Vinci Code, where every step you go in this treacherous adventure, you discover pieces of the puzzle that connect it together. And so the Curse of Cortez took me years I had to do research into underwater geology and underwater typology. There were roads cut in the coral reefs off of Belize and Honduras that head directly out to this particular island. There were just all sorts of hints that really talk about how, and I finally realized after years of research that this island used to be on dry land. It used to be part of the dry land 13,000 years ago when the asteroid hit. So it was actually part of the culture back then and only became an island after the Younger Dryas disaster. So it was the location of what once was a civilization that was destroyed by this. And that became the Mayan mythology, not only their creation mythology, but they have a myth called Xilbaba. And Xilbaba is this submerged place of death, fear, evil spirits, and other things. And it perfectly described the caverns on this one island.
Do you know that? Have you shopped that to any producers in Hollywood? That would be a hell of a movie.
It would be a hell of a movie. Actually, the book won a semi-finalist for cinematic book for out of the Screencraft contest a couple of years ago. And if I ever meet some Hollywood producers, I think it would make an amazing action adventure thriller that I think would be it's a summer blockbuster. And I tell people when I pitch it at my signing events, I say, this is Indiana Jones meets Goonies for grown-ups with a splash of Stephen King. It's a summer blockbuster in a book.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, you're great to talk to. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk to you more on the 27th on Monday.
Oh, we are?
Yes,
okay.
we are. Because you're going to be back on the show, and that's when we'll be on KKNW. And this has been great fun. I want to thank you so much.
Remind me to talk a little bit about The Last Art, because there's some interesting history that goes with that one that deals with the Middle East. I think people will be fascinated with.
I will do that. We'll go through that one as well. And I want to just thank you for being here. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it. I enjoy being on your show. You're a lot of fun.
Well, thank you so much. It's great fun to. I mean, I'm a historical dude too, and I've just been fascinated with what you've been saying. So it's great,
Thank you.
and the AI, and if you, by the way, if you're just tuning into this now, go back. We had an extensive discussion about AI and what its impact on us today is, and what the potential impact on us in the future is. It really is well worth you sitting down and listening to this podcast in total. And I want to thank Guy for being here. Go to GuyMorrisBooks.com and find out all about his books and him. Uh, Quite a life, quite a life. Your wife is I'm sure is very proud to know you. She just wants to keep you safe.
She is. I'm just not allowed to talk about artificial intelligence in the future at dinner parties because she wants to make sure that we keep our friends.
I get it. I get it. It's right now. It's a bit of a controversial subject, but it's not going to be forever, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much. And if you wait right there, I'll be right back.
Thank you, Kevin. Take care.
Hey, thanks for enjoying this episode all the way to the end. Please give us a like and subscribe to this channel. This has been a production of PositiveTalkRadio.net. Please visit our website, oddly named PositiveTalkRadio.net, for more details about us and our mission, which is to provide great positive programming designed to inspire us all. I'm Kevin McDonald, and I'm proud of these shows, and I truly hope that you'll like them and share them with friends and family. So on behalf of our entire team, remember, be kind to one another, because